Wow. Joe DeGuardia, the head of the Boxing Promoters
Joe
Association.
DeGuardia of the Boxing.
Hello.
Yes, can we please speak to Joe?
Yeah, Joe speaking.
Hey, Joe, this is Dave Duenas with my partner, Gabriel Montoya. You're live with us here on Leaving the Ring Radio. Welcome to the show, brother.
Hello, guy. How are you?
One of the things I just kind of wanted to begin with, I mean, most people, maybe you haven't been on the show before. I wanted to give a little bit of an introduction, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. You're the founder and CEO of Star Boxing out of the Bronx, New York. You promoted fighters like Lou Del Valle and Antonio Tarver. You promoted Tarver and Hopkins. You're the head of the Boxing Promoters Association. You're a former New York Golden Gloves champion. And you also work for the district attorney's office out there, and you have your own law office.
And that pretty much covers a lot of it.
We did our homework, Joe. We did our homework.
Now, recently you came out with a statement I thought was pretty fantastic. You, after the Pacquiao-Bradley, you issued a statement from the Boxing Promoters Association as their president, just kind of demanding reform across the board. How has that been received by your peers?
No, it's been received excellent. I tell you that, it's a good, fresh, and rewarding to see that when there are issues that affect everybody and issues that really are for the greater good of the sport, it's good to see that other promoters are rallying behind it and in support of it. And it's not just promoters, by the way. It's the entire industry.
Well, I wanted to have a follow-up. Now, Joe, when you see guys that are accepting this and they're going like, okay, I'm all for this, actions obviously speak louder than words. How many of them have followed up, though, with you? I mean, first conversation, have any of them received a second or third conversation, or have they continued to reach out to you to hopefully pursue what the idea of trying to clean up this judging in boxing?
Well, look, there's been a lot of follow-up. There's been a lot of many, many different conversations with other promoters, with commissions and everything else. And really, the goal is to be able to keep the ball rolling, to be able to, keep the momentum going. And frankly, that entails everybody getting involved. It entails the media staying on top of it. It entails promoters staying on top of it, commissions staying on top of it. And, we're going to do our best to try to make sure that happens, because change needs to happen, reform needs to happen. Not because, look, the sport's doing okay. When you have the numbers that we've been getting with, Mayweather and Pacquiao and the top end of the sport, and when you look and see that of all the athletes for 2011, 2 boxers led everything, every other sport.
Right.
The sport's doing okay. Okay, so the fact is, though, even though we're doing okay, even though money's coming into the sport at the top levels, the important aspect is that we have to still look at the things that need to be changed. And when things like judges, and we're not getting the best judges in there for the best highest fights, we could do changes. We could do things to correct it. And that's what we need to do.
Do you think it's just too the relationships are too old? They're like I was at Pacquiao-Bradley, and Bob, everybody is outraged, but shooting down any possibility of corruption. And Bob is saying, well, I know these judges. I've known them for 20, 30 years. Don't you think there's a problem when a promoter knows the judges that well?
I don't think that's the issue. I think, certainly when you go to an NBA game or you go to an NFL game, the owners all know who the officials are. The players know who the officials are. But those officials, you think and you expect are going to be beyond reproach, and they're going to be the most competent officials that are out there. And that's what we need to do. We just have to go out there and try to get the most competent officials. We have to go out there and do our best to help arm the commissions and arm the regulatory bodies that are picking judges, to assist them in making sure that they have the resources to get the best judges, to be able to train them in the best ways, to be able to take remedial action if judges aren't performing up to their capabilities or the way they should be performing, and to take the appropriate actions if that occurs. But those are the types of things that we need to be looking at. We need to be looking at how do we help? How do we as promoters go out there and help the commissions, help the regulatory bodies be able to make the right choices on the structure of appointing officials, on the structure of training officials, on the structure of coming up with an objective scoring system that's nationwide or globally for our sport. and how do we come up and give them the tools to take remedial actions when somebody does something wrong. And by the way, I also believe that we have to do this on a broad scale. It can't just be based upon one state. It can't be based upon, well, by way of a good example, if you're having the Super Bowl in Indianapolis, you don't say we're only going to use Indiana officials. We're going to get the best because it's the Super Bowl. We need to do that in our sport as well.
I agree with that too. Let me ask you just really quick here, Joe, because this is something that we have wondered, and we actually are following up with some of the commissions, and we haven't got a response back just yet. What is the criteria for judges? How do they pick them? What do they actually need in order to become official? You know, what is their background? Do you know any of this, or is that something that you have to look at fix?
Yeah, those things vary per state, and the appointment process varies per state, and sometimes it could be a rotational process. Sometimes it could be, a favor process, almost like a political appointment. At other times, it could be based upon who the regulatory agency believes is the best judge. But the point is that we need to take that process and say, what's the best way to have a process that ensures a process that has integrity, a process that has credibility, a process that can come up with the most competent judges. Now, we may differ upon how it is that we get that process into place, but we need to start the dialogue. We need to get together and have commissions, have promoters, have all the people that are involved in the sport lend their input to come up with basically the parameters, the outlines of how we do this. How do we pick judges? How are they going to be trained? How are they going to be monitored? Those types of things. And that's the important thing, is that we come up with that criteria, come up with an objective basis from which to do an analysis of the judges and to monitor them. And that's the idea, is to come up with something uniform throughout this country.
I like what you're saying. Absolutely. I love what I'm hearing from you. But give us an example of what it's going to entail. What are the plans? Has there been any plan formed to try to correct this, of picking better judges? What are some of the suggestions?
No, look, certainly there are, and certainly, a lot of it revolves around working with the commissions and the regulatory agencies to be able to pinpoint the criteria. First off, the criteria on how a judge scores a fight. And, states may differ upon what it is that a judge is looking for. But wherever you are, whenever you have a fight, it should be that all the participants knows what the judge is going to be looking for. Is he going to be looking for effective aggressiveness as number one, or is he going to be looking for punching as number one, or the amount of punches as number one, or the effectiveness of those punches, or the damage that it does? The fact is that we should be able to have the ability to give the fighters the knowledge of what the judges are going to be looking for. That should be number one. And even if it differs from state to state, when you're fighting in a state, they should be able to give that to you.
So do you give them? Do you give them past tapes of fights to so let's say I want to be a judge and I walk in and I go, look, I know Joe and et cetera. Do you sit me down? Do you give me past tapes and then allow me to judge it, and then you go off of to see whether or not, if I am a guy that has an eye to see the particulars in a fight, is that the way of? Would that be the proper way, the proper channel of being a judge?
Yeah, look, certain states right now, they'll evaluate judges, they'll monitor them, they'll see them maybe come up through the amateur ranks, put them in the fights, or let them judge as fights as a monitor type of judge, where they just they're basically a judge in training. They score the fights and they see how they compare to other judges' scorecards. So I mean, look, people, it's not as if they're not trying. It's not as if the commissions are not trying. It's not as if the regulatory agencies don't do things to try to ensure that they get good judges. I mean, that takes place. And the fact is that promoters, we all want to have, for the most part, you want to have judges that are reliable and have integrity and credibility, because the business can't flourish if the public doesn't understand that these people are going to be credible and they're going to be good judges. It's no good for the business, and when it's no good for the business, nobody makes money. So the reality is that it's important for us to all do the things that we need to do to give the public that kind of confidence. And there are many things that, as promoters, we can do to help the commissions in that process. We work in many different states, so we can be the one and the catalyst that puts these states together. We can be the catalyst that says, utilize your resources. Well, Nevada, if you have resources about judges, and New York, if you have resources about judges, let's pool it together. Let's make it collective. Let's find out. Let's know who the best are out there. Let's come up with a tiered system. Let's come up with A-rated judges, B-rated judges, C-rated judges, and the like. And you know what? If it's going to be a fight that entails, a mega fight, a pay-per-view fight like a Pacquiao fight, those judges have to come from the A pool.
Well,
and that's what we need to do.
Let me ask you this.
That's a solid system. I like that.
Hold on. Let me just ask this really quick, Joe, because something caught my ear. Where you said that it's not good for the business. You're absolutely right, but it has been good for the business because this continues to happen. I mean, you wouldn't be drawing up a new plan of trying to get better judges and cleaning up the sport if this wasn't continuing. Obviously, this has been good business because they still keep putting up fights out there that are very questionable.
Well, no, that's not the case. I mean, look, the business still takes place and boxing still flourishes because we have a sport that people want to see. The fact is that boxing is a sport that at its peak is the best sport in the world, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And that I believe that's why people keep coming back and people are going to be there. But that doesn't mean that we're better off by having bad decisions. Frankly, when you have a bad decision, the public loses confidence in fights. I mean, people were saying they didn't want to come to fights anymore. They want to come see a fight when they see a bad decision like that. It robs the integrity of the sport. And anything that robs the integrity of the sport is going to ultimately affect the bottom line. And the idea is we have to go out there and show that this sport is credible. The public needs to know that, and the public has to feel comfortable in that. And they have to know, and the fighters, by the way, need to know that. You know, a fighter fights and trains his whole life, trains every single day, puts his heart and soul into it, puts his heart and soul every day into what he's doing. And then what happens?
Absolutely.
He goes and gets rocked. And that's a heartbreaker. That's more damaging to a guy than his pocket sometimes, because this sometimes is heart, and this is soul, and this is what you put into it. And a lot of times it's more than just money. And a guy goes into that ring, he should know he's going to get a fair shake. And it shouldn't matter whether he's fighting in Germany, whether he's fighting in New York, whether he's fighting a New York fighter and is a New York judge. It shouldn't matter. And those are the things that we need to correct, and the public has to see that we're correcting them. And frankly, we need to take the steps to really correct it, not just perception, but really correct it, because it's important for our sport. And in the long run, it'll really help our sport financially, because as long as the public knows that the sport is clean, that the sport has integrity and credibility, the public's going to support it, and so will corporations and sponsors and everything else. And that means more for fighters, it means more for promoters, it means more for everybody associated in the business. And frankly, we could start doing more in the business as more money comes in.
How do you think we got here? You know, we're not on network anymore, although the idea of network has changed. I mean, Main Event is on MSNBC, which is basic cable, which is basically, you know, this generation's version of network. But we're not as relevant anymore in the general consciousness. There is some, bad judging. I think that's just the nature of it's a human error. But how do you think we got to this point where we need serious reform and we're behind on drug testing and all the things that kind of plague us? Is it just that we haven't shaken up the system? We're not like a league that can kind of shake these people out? What do you think it is?
Certainly there's things that we can do to correct our industry. And certainly I believe that if we had a league, and I don't believe in a federal government league, I believe in more of a private league, the way the NFL is and Major League Baseball is, and NBA. And we can get into that in a second. But
yes,
look, these things happen in other sports also. You know, we have a sport where judging oftentimes is subjective. But you have bad calls in other sports. The other day, I saw an outcry. It was in the papers in the Daily News yesterday, the New York Daily News, that the fellow who was playing against the New York Yankees was flipping out about a call that was made against him where it looked like the guy caught the ball in the stands, but he actually didn't. And the umpire, it was clear that the ball was dropped, and the umpire said he's still out. And now there was a real outcry, and the guy says, well, officials should be demoted the same way, we get demoted if we're not doing our jobs. So same thing happened in Major League Baseball. The same thing happened last year in that perfect game when the umpire blew the call.